When it comes to comics and the history behind them, we've definitely covered a lot of shady deals and backhanded business relationships. But none of it makes me nearly as angry as Bob Kane manages to do. Because of the way I format these videos, we're going to touch on a minor DC character first, but boy is the stuff about our boy Bob a frickin' doozy. If this is your first time with us, I've found that a lot of modern media is pretty impenetrable to newcomers. My goal is to provide a breakdown and guide to the DC universe in the order of creation so it isn't quite as overwhelming. If you have a favorite character or story and it isn't in this video, it's likely to be found in either a previous one or a video coming later down the line. So to the newbies, welcome, and to the oldies, welcome back. Let's talk about DC Comics. Let's say hello to Brian O'Brien. You might have noticed that he's our first character to begin their life outside of Earth 2. O'Brien was a New York district attorney who inexplicably decided to turn to vigilante justice. Their goals, aspirations, and even origin are all left unclear. But one day he decided he'd start wearing a mask, the first hero to do so, and started cracking the heads of the corrupt. Maybe he got fed up with the justice system, or some gangster got away. The Clock has 1,000,001 skills and gadgets. Over his 7-year career, he'd been shown to be an expert in aeronautics, boxing, chemistry, crime scene investigation, disguises, hypnotism, safecracking, ventriloquism, and voice mimicry. It seems if there was something to master, he did it with total ease. On the note of gadgets, he had a cane that could fire the handle like a projectile, tear gas, calling cards triggered to combust a few moments after someone picks them up, and, well, torture devices. So I might like to argue that the Clock is actually somewhat of an anti-hero. Looking through his appearances, he definitely isn't averse to what can translate as brutal violence. Throwing people around after they've already been shot, or shoving bad guys into his Iron Maiden as an interrogation tactic. The dude's walking on the fence of Punisher territory. Interestingly, while the Clock's developmental history is a bit muddled, it seems that they've also fallen into the public domain, since he's popped up in a few comics from other companies like Dynamite and Malibu. I think that's also bolstered by the fact that the Clock hasn't been seen in the DC continuity in nearly 80 years. So, rest soundly, you freaky work of fiction. Bob Kane was born as Robert Kahn to Augusta and Herman, two Ashkenazi Jewish immigrants who started their new lives together in New York City. Robert made high school friends with Will Eisner, creator of The Spirit, and had his name legally changed after graduation. This may very well have been one of the last original ideas he had for the rest of his life. So Bob gets to work and joins Fleischer Animations as a trainee animator, and then gives comics a shot a couple years later, basically seeing dollar signs when he thought about the potential growth of the format. He works for the contract company Eisner and Iger, run by his buddy Will, and they do a decent chunk of drawing and writing for National Allied Publications, the company that we know now as DC Comics. But Bob, overcome by the sheer weight of having to actually work on more than one thing per week, finds an unfortunate soul named Bill Finger. He hires Bill to work on some of his assigned comic strips, Rusty and Clip Carson, but as a ghost author. For the uninitiated, it means that Bill does all the work, or close to it, and Bob Kane still gets to slap his name on it and say it's his precious baby. So, Superman happens. It's a big success. In fact, calling it that is a total understatement. But NAP being a business, they couldn't just have the one product. They needed more similar titles. So Bob Kane rolls into the office and says with pure, smug confidence that he'll have something in a couple business days. Kane has said he drew inspiration from plenty of sources, including Douglas Fairbanks' Zorro and Roland West's The Bat Whispers, which itself was based upon Mary Reinhardt's The Circular Staircase. All of this inspiration came together in one creativity-driven night in Bob Kane's apartment to create the Batman. And here it is in its original inception. Clearly it was, well, bad. Bob knew it too, so he called up Bill and had him visit to give it a once-over. Bill Finger gave it a glance, then a look, and finally a review. It was too close to Superman in design. I mean, aside from the wings and domino mask, it was basically a palette-swapped Man of Steel. Now, I won't touch on Bill Finger's history today, that'll come later, but Kane himself eventually admitted, long after Finger was dead, that Bill was behind about 75% of Batman's creation and the related characters, just to put what comes next into perspective. Days later, Bob Kane rolls back into the office and hands in the Batman, created by Bob Kane. Just Bob Kane. Nobody else. Bill who? That guy? No, if he says he did anything, he's just lying about it. Ignore him. No, let him keep working in the office. I'll keep an eye on him. Anyhow, Batman's a hit too, in case you weren't sure, and Bob Kane is suddenly tasked with spreading Batman as far and wide as he possibly can. So he goes on to hire a solid half-dozen new ghostwriters and artists, and the most work he seems to put in is signing his name. Okay, maybe I'm being a little harsh, but he didn't even do his own art in the office, always at home. And frankly, I'm a little suspicious of the guy, even more than I was with the literal mob associates we've talked about before. But he still manages to have a working relationship with Bill Finger, since Bill really just wants his creation to be a good one, and Bill continues writing the comic even if his name isn't on it. After a few issues get printed, Bill goes to Bob Kane and essentially says, "Hey, Batman is talking to himself constantly. It's weird. Can't we give him a buddy to speak to?" Bob loves the idea and thinks that the sidekick should be a kid, someone for younger readers to see themselves in. Kane sits down and considers who this sidekick should be. His name will be Mercury, and he'll have superpowers, opening the doors for wilder stories on bigger scales. Historic comic writer Jerry Robinson pops his head in and does a little course correction. The name is changed to Robin after Robin Hood, and he's stripped of his powers, since it wouldn't really mesh with Batman, a man who would immediately wind up lower on the totem pole. So now Robin joins the fight in Gotham, and as a domino effect, inspires hundreds of other sidekicks. The next big step in Kane's career comes with DC's rare and most underutilized character, the Joker. The origin is disputed, especially by Bob Kane, but here are the cliff notes. Jerry Robinson, riding high after that bit with Robin, visits Bob Kane and Bill Finger and presents to them a playing card. More specifically, a Joker. This is the same card that gets used in a lot of the characters' iconography. Jerry says he thinks it would be a good concept for the next Batman villain, and Bill gets a stroke of inspiration. He pulls out a photo he had in a reference book of Conrad Veidt, in his role from The Man Who Laughs. This is the face of the Joker. Bill Finger would go on to argue that the order of events was actually the reverse, with him finding the picture of Veidt first, but I think it's a negligible difference in all honesty. Bob Kane, however, would dispute the whole encounter, saying he came up with the entire idea of the Joker solo, and that Bill and Jerry were just desperately pawing at some undeserved credit. This guy. I've been avoiding mature language with these videos, but just know that in my mind, I've got more than a few choice expletives for him. Outside of the office, Bob meets and marries a woman named Beverly Majeski, and they have a daughter named Deborah. Now, alright, let me give some credit. While a lot of things with Kane's name on them are disputable, if not outright BS, he's got a handful of characters that everybody agrees are fully his ideas. These include Two-Face, Catwoman, Scarecrow, and the original Clayface. But if you thought that Bob's shenanigans were over, you clearly haven't looked at the runtime left on this video. So he leaves the Batman title in 1943 to work on the spin-off newspaper strip, but keeps a few ghosts on staff so his name doesn't ever leave the byline. 3 years later he comes back, but hires even more ghost authors, so spectral that even DC didn't know about them. At this point, let's be real, it'd be miraculous if the guy was even doing 1/10 of his own work. He's practically got a baker's dozen of underpaid, uncredited workers who were all stuck with him until the late 60s. So, in 1957, he and Bev get divorced, and after Adam West brings Batman to the small screen, Kane bows out from the comic industry and instead tries to finagle his way into becoming a minor celebrity. After DC, his fine art pieces were his biggest claim to fame. Of course, they were mainly created by more ghost artists. He also created a few characters for 2 animated shows, Courageous Cat and Cool McCool. 1987, Bob remarried, this time to Elizabeth Sanders, and later got the joy of being a consultant for Tim Burton's Batman movie in '89. Now, reaching the final stages of Bob Kane's life story, I think the next few details we have to cover kind of play like a greatest hits album of his consistently terrible behavior. Almost to his last breath, Bob vehemently defended his reputation as the sole creator behind Batman and Robin. Not Bill Finger, not Jerry Robinson, just him, and him alone. If either of them said anything, Bob called them liars and shut them down. It wasn't until Kane's autobiography, after Finger had already passed, that he said he deserved more credit for his contribution to the character. But I don't know if that really counts as an apology, especially since the book was also written by a ghostwriter. The man loved to talk about himself, but couldn't even be bothered to write the book! Bob received a posthumous star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. At the time, most believed Bill Finger was buried in an unmarked potter's field. If you're interested, and I'm not sure why you would be, Bob Kane's art and other things labeled as Bob Kane's art are still housed in collections at New York City's Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, and St. John's University. This is the legacy of a man who claimed to be Batman's creator, the man who climbed to the top of the heap and spent the preceding 50-odd years doing one thing: punching down. The one redeeming factor is that more and more people are coming to realize that he wasn't all that he made himself out to be. And that's where we'll leave our story for now. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you really liked it, check out our Patreon in the description to see the next one up to a week early. And if you liked me, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.